Can I say, I can't tell you how joyful it is to have people of all ages filling this church today after these long, long months of isolation. If you're here with a baby or a toddler or a young child, please know how welcome they are. They're very, very welcome to run around, to make a noise, to make us all smile and laugh. That's part of the joy of Easter. So please don't be anxious if you're here with somebody who's not sitting as still as a statue. On the other hand, adults, please sing. Open your mouths and sing. We love to hear the sound we can make together. We do not know where they have laid him. When I read the words of Mary Magdalene and the other women desperately searching for the body of Jesus, I can't help thinking this year of what is going on in Ukraine. How many families are searching for the bodies of their loved ones killed in atrocities against civilians in Mariupol and other cities? How many Russian mothers are grieving for the loss of a soldier's son lost in a war far away whose purpose he did not understand? Nothing is harder than not knowing what has happened to a person who is dear to you, not being able to grieve and slowly, painfully come to terms with a terrible loss. So many stories in the Bible have come alive for me this year in a new way because of what is happening in the world today. We read in the Gospels of people who are shunned by society because of their sickness, in a time when indeed the pandemic has divided us from our neighbors in ways that we have never experienced before. We're afraid to get close to people, to touch them. We've literally been unable to comfort one another. Well, we also read constantly of the plight of the poor in the Bible. The Hebrew prophets rail against those who live rich and comfortable lives while their neighbors suffer. And Jesus saves his harshest words for those who ignore the cries of those in want. Yet, we live in a rich nation which has decided to let the number of people living in absolute poverty rise relentlessly, and we're even incredibly on the point of planning to send people thousands of miles away to another country when they come here in desperate circumstances. And we cannot escape the horrors of the war in Ukraine. Like me, you may find it increasingly difficult even to read or watch the news, and yet millions of people have no choice but to endure what is happening to their homeland. And most shamefully, leaders of the Russian Orthodox Church continue to refuse to condemn the ongoing murderous aggression. So perhaps this year, it's easier than it sometimes is to enter imaginatively into the state of mind of Mary Magdalene. Things are just about as bad as they can be. There is nothing she can do to put right the terrible things that have happened leading up to the death of her beloved teacher and Lord. At least, she thinks, at least she can grieve over his broken body. But even that is denied to her, because it seems that grave robbers have been there before her and stolen his corpse. So she gives way to the most natural urge in the world and dissolves in tears of despair. And it is at this indescribably low point in her life that a stranger addresses her. First, he calls her woman, which, by the way, is a perfectly polite way to speak to someone in this culture. But the next time he speaks to her, he calls her Mary. And that is when her world is transformed. She is known, she is recognized, she is loved in the midst of her sorrow and despair. The Lord that she knew was dead is somehow, impossibly, here, alive, commissioning her by name to carry to the other disciples the best news the world has ever heard. And I think of that as the moment when the church was born, when the first of Jesus' friends to meet the risen Lord was called by name and given the task of sharing the news of the resurrection life. It's echoed when every new Christian life begins in the waters of baptism. We rise from the tomb with Christ, we are called by our name, and we are commissioned to be a witness to the resurrection. Our eternal life, that life outside of time, which is filled with awe and wonder and joy, begins at that moment, and it never ends. The first Christians were always baptized before dawn on Easter morning in order to demonstrate that this is what their baptism meant. And today we have the great happiness of celebrating a baptism at our Easter service. In just a few minutes, young Harmony Buxton will be called by name to enter into that new and eternal life with Christ. I am so glad that Easter 2022 is marked here at St. Mary's by the baptism of a child of God. In this year of so much suffering, fear, and sadness, we boldly proclaim that nothing can overcome the life and hope that Jesus gives us. Not war, not want, not illness, not grief. All of these things are terrible evils in our world. We must struggle against them and give every possible support to those who are in greater need than we are. We must speak the truth about what is wrong in our world, just as the prophets did. Think of those young people protesting about the climate crisis at the moment. We must speak out against what is wrong. But we must also listen through our tears to the voice that is gently calling to each of us. Jesus Christ knows us by name. He invites us to join him in the life that is stronger than death. Trusting God to lead us in our journey of faith and to seize the promise of that life may be the hardest choice we ever make. Many people will think that we're mad or deluded or simply engaging in childish wish fulfillment. But those who have walked this journey for many years know that God is faithful. Whatever happens in this life, God is with us. As Rowan Williams said in his Good Friday sermon this year, there is nothing between us and God. There is nothing between us and our neighbor. There is nothing between us and our own selves. Jesus has broken down every barrier. He lives fully in God and fully in us. So we can walk into the future, even in this broken and sinful and suffering world, in confidence that the risen Jesus Christ lives in us and we live in him. In the resurrection life, there is perfect harmony between us and God, between us and our neighbor, between us and our own deepest self.